Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone following the broadcast. Here are the top stories tonight.
4 people are confirmed dead and 159 unaccounted following the collapse of an oceanfront apartment building near Miami Beach as rescue teams scour a mountain of rubble in a desperate search for survivors.
Former President Benigno Simeon Cojuangco Aquino III was laid to rest at the Manila Memorial Park in Parañaque City.
Australia's largest city locks down to contain a sudden COVID surge.
And a Somali man killed 3 people and left 5 others seriously injured in an incredible brutal knife rampage in the southern German city of Würzburg.
It has been another long day of watching and waiting following the collapse of an oceanfront apartment building near Miami Beach. And officials have now confirmed 4 are dead, with 159 still unaccounted for. As shock set in among the local community in Surfside, the state's governor called for full light to be shed without delay on the causes of the freak disaster, which reduced one wing of a 12-story tower to a gigantic pile of debris. Take a look.
We need a definitive explanation for how this could have happened. And that's an explanation that needs to be an accurate explanation. It's an explanation that, we don't want to get wrong, obviously. But at the same time, I do think it's important that it's timely because you have a lot of families here. You have families that lost loved ones in this building collapse. They have a right to know.
It was like an earthquake is what it felt like. My husband and I were sleeping and we were woken up by the building shaking very violently and aggressively, and I'm not accustomed to stuff like that.
I was sleeping in deep sleep and I heard a huge crash, which I thought was a crash of lightning, but it continued for, I'd say, 15-20 minutes.
Now, Friday at 11:30 in the morning, it's coming up on 36 hours. And you have 90 people buried over here, and there's no one here.
My uncle's apartment's right there where that purple pillow is by that screen door. Okay, there hasn't been one rescue worker trying to actually take off debris, little by little, even by hand, without machines, to actually get people potentially removed.
The search and rescue team worked throughout the night, and it was a very active scene from above and below. And we also brought heavy machinery onto the site to assist with the operation. And so we are very, very grateful that our president has now authorized FEMA support.
Not good. Not good. It's not good, but we're very hopeful that we are going to find her. They told us, the detectives mentioned that there were 3 people that were deceased at the moment that have been reported, and she's not one of them. So we're hoping that she is in one of the hospitals. We just don't know when we're going to hear from her.
Now, Canada said on Friday at least 4 of its citizens may be affected by the collapse. Without elaborating, at least 18 Latin American nationals are known to be among the missing, including Uruguayans, Argentines, and Paraguayans. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Assistant Chief Ray Jadala said search teams were being guided by sound. The Surfside building was occupied by a mix of full-time and seasonal residents and renters. And officials have stressed it's unclear how many people were actually inside at the time of the collapse, which pancaked around 55 apartments. While the reasons for the collapse remain unclear, the condition of the 40-year-old waterfront building is certain to face scrutiny. Completed in 1981, Champlain Towers was due to be recertified this year in line with Miami-Dade County safety regulations and was undergoing construction work on its roof as part of that process. According to a study led by Florida International University Environment Professor Shimon Vidovinsky, based on space-based radar data, the site showed signs of land subsidence in the mid-1990s, or subsidence. Another of the university's experts, Atarod Azizi Namini, chair of its Department of Civil Environmental Engineering, said in an online video that it was too soon to speculate on a cause. He said structural engineers would collect vast quantities of data on design plans and construction methods, take samples of steel and concrete, look at signs of corrosion, examine the foundation, and try to detect any unusual event before the collapse.
Here in the Philippines now, former President Benigno Simeon Cojuangco Aquino III was laid to rest at the Manila Memorial Park in Parañaque City. After the necrological services at the Church of Yesu inside the campus of his alma mater, Ateneo de Manila in Quezon City, Aquino was buried beside the tombs of his parents, former Senator Benigno Jr. and Corazon, the president 4 terms earlier. Full military honors marked the funeral, including a gun salute and a flyby by the Philippine Air Force. During the interment, the military executed hugay kamay, or hand salute, at 1 pound, and the traditional 21 gun salute, while the Philippine Marine Corps drum and the bugle team played on. The simultaneous gun salutes are the AFP's final salute to a former commander-in-chief. Only former presidents are entitled to such. President Rodrigo Duterte has declared June 24 to July 3 as a period of national mourning over the passing of his predecessor. It was under Aquino's presidency that the Philippines initiated a case against China over its expansive claims in the South China Sea. In 2016, the Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled that Beijing's 9-dash line had no basis in law. Aquino, also known as Noy Noy and Pinoy, or President Noy Noy, as the 15th president of the Philippines from 2010 to 2016, succumbed to renal failure secondary to diabetes at 6:30 a.m. of Thursday at the Capital Medical Center in Quezon City. He turned 61 on February 8. During his presidency in 2013, he was named as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine.
In other news, Australia's largest city, Sydney, entered a 2-week lockdown today to contain a sudden COVID surge. But several European nations lifted restrictions despite the global spread of the highly contagious form of the disease, Delta variant. While vaccination drives have brought down infections in numerous, mostly wealthy countries, the rise of the Delta variant, which first emerged in India, has stoked fears of new waves of a virus that has already killed nearly 4 million people. Take a look.
Can I please stress to everybody, those lockdowns, stay-at-home provisions we'd put in those local government areas from last night, please strictly adhere to them. Can I stress very strictly, if you live or work in those 7 local government council areas that we spoke about last Monday, do not leave metropolitan Sydney under any circumstances. We do not want this virus transmitting in our regions. I said a few days ago that this is the scariest time Sydney, New South Wales has been during the course of the pandemic, and I mean that. This variant of the virus is contagious and transmissible like no other variant that we've seen. And that is why the New South Wales government will take any necessary action it needs to take.
Say that there's a growing and more intense concern by the health authorities here in New South Wales, and therefore the government in New South Wales, at the actions of this Delta variant of the COVID virus. The Delta variant is proving to be a very formidable foe. No matter what defensive steps we're taking at the moment, the virus seems to understand how to counterattack in different locations. That's causing us a high level of concern. My message to the community is you will understand the basic rules. Stay home if you're sick, get tested and go home. We know it can only spread if we're near other people. If we stay away from other people, then that's a major defensive step that hopefully it can't counterattack against.
Really bad case of deja vu.
Yeah.
We've been struggling trying to get it back from the lockdowns of last year because this area is always subject to tourism, both domestic and foreign. So today just feels like another kick while you're slowly getting up. So yeah, pretty bad, pretty miserable, pretty depressing.
Now, Sydney's restrictions require people to stay home for at least 2 weeks, only venturing out to purchase essential goods, obtain medical care, exercise, go to school, or if they are unable to work from home. Anyone outside of the lockdown zone who had visited Sydney since Monday was also instructed to self-isolate for 14 days. Many are reeling from the shock of the sudden onset of the outbreak in a city that had returned to relative normality after months with very few cases, but the Delta is so contagious that experts say more than 80% of a population would need to be jabbed in order to contain it, a challenging target even for nations with significant vaccination programs. While several studies have shown that vaccines are slightly less effective against Delta, they're still highly effective, but only after the second dose.
Meanwhile, New Zealand announced a 3-day suspension of its quarantine-free travel arrangement with Australia, with Wellington citing multiple outbreaks of COVID-19 in the neighboring country. The announcement comes as a 2-week lockdown begins in Sydney to contain a rapidly spreading outbreak of the Delta coronavirus variant. More than 80 cases have been reported so far in Australia's largest city, while a handful of community cases have also been recorded in the Northern Territory, Victoria, and Queensland in recent days. New Zealand's COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, said he understood the inconvenience the pause would cause and added that New Zealand remained committed to quarantine-free travel with Australia. He added that the suspension would give officials time to consider measures to make the bubble safer, such as pre-departure testing for all flights between the two countries. New Zealand has previously paused the bubble arrangement 5 times with individual states, but this is the first time it has put a blanket halt to quarantine-free travel from all of Australia.
Moscow authorities reimposed work-from-home restrictions for 30% of the workforce starting June 28, as the Russian capital posts a new daily record for COVID deaths due to a surging outbreak of the Delta variant. In a decree published on its website, the city's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, ordered that businesses cut their number of in-office workers by 30% from June 28. Vaccinated employees would be excluded, according to the decree, adding that all workers age over 65, as well as those with pre-existing conditions, would have to work from home. The new measures come as Russia has seen an explosion of new cases since mid-June, driven by the highly infectious Delta variant first identified in India. In Moscow, the epicenter of Russia's outbreak, the variant represents 90% of new infections, according to Sobyanin. Authorities reported 20,393 infections across the country on Friday, including just under 8,000 in the capital. Moscow also recorded 98 coronavirus deaths, its highest one-day toll since the start of the pandemic. The Delta variant has been surging among a population that has largely rejected coronavirus vaccines, despite jabs having been available for free since early December.
Now, the World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus expresses concern about the rapid spread of the Delta variant of COVID-19, while access to the vaccine remains extremely imbalanced around the world. Take a look.
I know that globally there is currently a lot of concern about the Delta variant, and WHO is concerned about it too. Delta is the most transmissible of the variants identified so far, has been identified in at least 85 countries, and is spreading rapidly among unvaccinated populations. As some countries ease public health and social measures, we're starting to see increases in transmission around the world. More cases means more hospitalizations, further stretching health workers and health systems, which increases the risk of death. As we have said, new variants are expected and will continue to be reported. That's what viruses do. They evolve. But we can prevent the emergence of variants by preventing transmission. The tailored and consistent use of public health and social measures in combination with equitable vaccination. This is why WHO has been saying for at least a year that vaccines must be distributed equitably.
Cases are now on the rise in Russia, Australia, Israel, and across parts of Africa, in part due to the Delta variant. Other countries fear they could be next. The Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2 was first detected in India, where it began circulating around April. In Europe, Delta initially gained a foothold in Britain, where it quickly outpaced the previous variant of concern, Alpha, and now comprises 95% of all sequenced cases in England. Delta is thought to be some 40 to 60% more contagious than the Alpha variant, which itself is more contagious than the strain responsible for the first wave of COVID-19. The European Center for Disease Control, or the ECDC, has estimated Delta could account for 70% of new infections in the EU by the beginning of August and 90% by the end of that month.
Now, in the United States last week, 35% of positive tests that were sequenced were identified as the Delta variant, up from about 10% on June 5, numbers similar to what is being observed in Israel. Top U.S. infectious disease scientist Anthony Fauci called the variant the greatest threat to efforts to control the virus and urged an acceleration in vaccinations. Take a look.
The Delta variant. What do we know about that variant? The transmissibility is unquestionably greater than the wild-type SARS-CoV-2 as well as the Alpha variant. It is associated with an increased disease severity as reflected by hospitalization risk compared to Alpha. And in lab tests associated with moderate decreased neutralization by sera from previously infected and vaccinated individuals, but efficacy, as I'll get to in a moment, is something that is held up. Some of the good news, and one of our tools, the effectiveness of the vaccines, in this case, 2 weeks after the second dose of Pfizer-BioNTech, was 88% effective against the Delta and 93% effective against the Alpha when you're dealing with symptomatic disease. Next slide. When you look at hospitalizations, again, both the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Oxford-AstraZeneca are between 92 and 96% effective against hospitalizations. Similar to the situation in the UK, the Delta variant is currently the greatest threat in the US to our attempt to eliminate COVID-19.
The Delta Plus variant that has spread from India to 11 countries with 200 cases is not yet a variant of concern, a health expert said on Saturday. In a televised public briefing of Laging Handa, Dr. Eva Maria Cotianco de la Paz, Executive Director of the University of the Philippines Manila National Institutes of Health, said the World Health Organization in its latest epidemiological report has not identified the Delta Plus variant, an emerging form of the Delta variant of the novel coronavirus, as a VOC. Take a look.
Importante. At itong K417N na nasa Delta Plus variant ay maari pong makakontribute sa immune escape. Sa huli pong COVID-19 weekly epidemiologic report ng WHO, ang Delta variant Plus ay hindi pa po variant of concern. Pero ang Delta variant ay variant of concern na po. Ang variant of concern po, para lang po maliwanagan ng ating mga tagapakinig, ay isang pamilya po ng coronavirus na may taglay na mga mutation na nagpapabago ng anyo nito at nagdudulot ng mga banta sa kalusugang pampubliko tulad ng mas madali siya makahawa, o di kaya po nakakapagdulot po siya ng mas malubhang sakit, o di kaya pwede niya pong iwasan ang mga epekto ng mga gamot o bakuna panlaban dito. So, ang mga tao pong may bakuna na sa COVID-19 na Delta variant po ang kanilang virus, mas maliit po ang pagkakataong ma-ospital kumpara po dun sa mga hindi na bakunahan. So, importante pa rin po, Yusek Rocky, ang pagpapabakuna.
De La Paz urged the public to do their part in keeping the number of infections low, since every case is an opportunity for the virus to mutate and become more transmissible, like what happened in India. She also assured the public that the Philippine Genome Center has the capability to sequence any coronavirus variant, as it has the government's full support even before the pandemic started.
In other news, over a dozen fully vaccinated doctors have died of COVID-19 in Indonesia, according to a medical association, as the Southeast Asian country battles a rash of severe cases in inoculated medical workers and highly infectious new virus strains. Nearly 1,000 Indonesian health workers have died from the virus since the pandemic started, with the country's medical association confirming on Friday that 401 doctors were among the victims, 14 of whom were fully vaccinated. The association's COVID-19 mitigation head, Mohammed Abib Kumaidi, told journalists that, quote, "We're still updating the data and confirming whether the other cases had been vaccinated or not." The rise of severe cases in inoculated medical workers has raised questions about the China-produced Sinovac jab, which Indonesia is heavily relying on to vaccinate more than 180 million people by early next year. This month, more than 300 vaccinated doctors and healthcare workers in Central Java were found to have been infected with COVID-19, with about a dozen hospitalized. The country is also grappling with new virus strains, including the highly infectious Delta variant first identified in India. Dozens of communities in Central Java's Kudus Regency were put under lockdown after the Delta variant was detected in local testing samples, causing a sudden spike in cases. The surge has been partly blamed on millions traveling from that region across the Muslim-majority nation at the end of Ramadan last month, despite an official ban on the annual migration.
The city of San Francisco has announced it will require all municipal employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19, or they could face penalties up to and including dismissal. The new rule, announced Wednesday, will not take effect until the vaccines have received full approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which has so far green-lit their use on an emergency basis due to the pandemic. San Francisco will then require its 35,000 employees, including police and firefighters, to be vaccinated. Those who fail to comply and do not receive an exemption for medical or religious reasons will be punished or could even be fired. Carol Eisen, the city's director of human resources, said it's about protecting the city as an employer from what we deem to be unacceptable risk. This week, more than 150 employees at one of Texas' largest hospitals were fired or resigned after refusing to comply with a COVID vaccination requirement. Officials at Houston Methodist had told its staff they needed to have received a COVID vaccination by June 7. Some staff members have filed a lawsuit against the hospital, accusing it of forcing its employees to be human guinea pigs as a condition for continued employment.
And it's been over a year since the COVID-19 pandemic forced 60 million Indonesian students to study from home. Schools are finally preparing classrooms in preparation for the resumption of in-class learning in July. December Paras has more.
Schools have been closed in most parts of the country due to the pandemic in the mid of last year. And with no end to the pandemic in sight, the government has insisted that in-class learning will resume when the next academic year starts. It's for the sake of the students whose right to education has been adversely affected by the health crisis.
President Joko Widodo gave his approval for in-person learning in the upcoming academic year starting in July, with strict requirements to ensure a safe return to schools during the COVID-19 pandemic. The government has decided that only 25% of the total number of students are allowed to attend classrooms at a time, Health Minister Budi Gunadi Sadikin said after a meeting with the president at the State Palace in central Jakarta. Students' attendance is limited to twice per week, and classroom activities will last only 2 hours per day. In-person learning is not a mandatory. Parents can still opt for remote schooling, he said. The president has instructed that in-person learning must be held with extra cautions. Moreover, school reopening requires all teachers and staff to be fully vaccinated. The government has therefore included 5 million teachers on its priority list for the national vaccination program, although a report says only 1/5 of those have been inoculated so far.
Yes, I am very aware of the Indonesian government's decision of in-class learning. And as a preschool teacher, I look forward to developing social skills with all of my students. And we are very fortunate that the school that I am in is have scheduled teachers for vaccination already, and I am fully vaccinated. And so if the school has agreed to open, I am hopeful that we are able to follow protocols and we are able to maintain a good standard so that all of our children and all of our students and staff and teachers are all safe and they are able to come and learn all these skills that we have.
Every school in Jakarta have different setup. For us teachers, we have been reporting in our schools, in our classrooms, while the students is in their comforts of their home. So if the government decided to have this face-to-face learning, I think we're ready. I just received my first vaccination this June and I'll receive my second on August.
The Education, Culture, Research and Technology Ministry has made it clear education cannot wait for the pandemic to be fully under control, as nobody knows when that will happen. In other words, reopening schools is a difficult choice, but a bold decision must be made for the greater good of children. A school's preparedness is measured by, among other things, classroom setting in compliance with physical distancing rules, hand washing facilities, temperature check devices, and internal mechanisms to prevent crowds.
The question is, are we really well prepared for schools to reopen? For sure, we are set to go through another cautious school year. The sooner the government flattens the COVID-19 transmission curve, the faster it can realize education for all. Reporting from Jakarta, Indonesia, this is December Paras. We live in interesting times.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. Hong Kong's new police chief called for a fake news law on Saturday and blamed the media for plunging trust in his officers in the politically polarized financial hub. His call comes after as authorities carry out a sweeping crackdown on dissent, and just days after outspoken newspaper Apple Daily was forced to fold following the freezing of its accounts under a tough new national security law. Surveys show the police have been the least popular disciplinary service in the city since Hong Kong was rocked by huge and sometimes violent pro-democracy protests in 2019, during which allegations of police brutality emerged. Police Chief Raymond Siu said much of the blame lay with the media. Hong Kong's demonstrations subsided last year due to mass arrests, the coronavirus pandemic, and Beijing's imposition of the security law, which critics argue has been used to curb dissent. 3 former police officers were on Friday promoted to key positions in government, with former Security Minister John Lee becoming the city's new number 2 official and an ex-police chief stepping into Lee's Security Bureau role.
In other news, a Somali man killed 3 people and left 5 others seriously injured in an incredibly brutal knife rampage in the southern German city of Würzburg. The 24-year-old suspect staged the attack in the city center at around 5 p.m. local time, striking at a household goods store before hitting a bank. Take a look.
Nach gegenwärtigem Stand handelt es sich hier um einen somalischen Staatsangehörigen, der seit 2015 hier in Würzburg sich aufhält, der zuletzt wohl in einer Obdachlosenunterkunft gelebt hat und wohl, wie jetzt die allerletzten Informationen besagen, auch vor kurzem schon einmal wegen psychischer Auffälligkeit in eine entsprechende psychiatrische Einrichtung eingewiesen wurde.
Now, a witness had reportedly said the suspect shouted Allah Akbar. Earlier, video footage circulating online also showed passers-by trying to stop the suspect using folded chairs. While the perpetrator's motive has not yet been established, Germany has been on high alert after several deadly Islamist extremist attacks. Würzburg was itself hit 5 years ago by an axe-wielding man who seriously wounded 4 people on a train. The suspect, an Afghan, sought to attack a passerby as he fled before being shot dead by police. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State jihadist group. The deadliest Islamist attack in Germany happened in December 2016 when a jihadist rammed a truck into a Berlin Christmas market, killing 12 people. The Tunisian attacker, a failed asylum seeker, was an ISIS supporter. A crowd of people gave chase before a police car arrived on the scene. One video showed that time.
Now, former policeman Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison on Friday for the murder of African-American George Floyd, the killing that sparked America's biggest demonstrations for racial justice in decades. The decision was read out at the end of a tense hearing in which the court watched a recorded message by Floyd's 7-year-old daughter and heard from Chauvin's mother. Take a look.
As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual. What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family. You have our sympathies.
My son's identity has also been reduced to that as a racist. I want this court to know that none of these things are true and that my son is a good man.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. There's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest, and I hope things will give you some peace of mind.
I'm here on behalf of my family, on behalf of me and my family, we seek the maximum penalty. We don't want to see no more slaps on the wrists. We've been through that already.
It is still attainable to get maximum accountability for George Floyd. Maximum accountability for George Floyd.
I've not been able to hear anything about what's happened. How long has he been sentenced?
22.5 years.
Well, I don't know all the circumstances that were considered, but it seems to me under the guidelines that seems to be appropriate.
The sentencing was long awaited in Minnesota, with hundreds of people gathering near the courthouse into the evening. Many said Chauvin should have gotten 30 or 40 years. Chauvin, who has been behind bars since being convicted on 3 counts of murder and manslaughter 2 months ago, wore a light gray suit as he learned his fate following a trial that captivated the world. With good behavior, Chauvin could serve just 2/3 of any prison sentence, with the remaining third on supervised release. The defense will appeal the verdict, his lawyer said, citing doubts over the impartiality of some jurors. On the eve of sentencing, the judge denied the defense's request for a new trial. Neither will the case end with Chauvin. His 3 former colleagues will face trial in March 2022 on charges of complicity in homicide.
In other news, Myanmar's southern Langlon Township sees protesters from several small villages stage marches against the junta, with children forming the vanguard of the strides. Protesters chant, hold up roses, and flash the three-fingered salute that has come to symbolize the country's movement, the pro-democracy movement. Take a look. The mass uprising against the military putsch that toppled the government of Aung San Suu Kyi has been met with a brutal crackdown that has killed more than 870 civilians, according to a local monitoring group. As well as the rise of local self-defense forces, analysts believe hundreds of anti-coup protesters from Myanmar's towns and cities have trekked into insurgent-held areas to receive military training. Myanmar's junta chief thanked Russia, a major weapons supplier to the troubled Southeast Asian country, for strengthening the army, which seized power in a coup earlier this year. Russia has backed its ally and warned the West against sanctioning the junta. However, the EU added 8 officials from Myanmar's junta and 3 firms linked to the military to its sanctions blacklist, and those targeted with asset freezes and visa bans included the Interior, Security, Finance, Natural Resources, and Transport ministers, according to listing published in the EU's official journal. The US and Britain have also targeted key officials and enterprises in the country, but so far the junta has shrugged off Western pressure.
In other news, a rare tornado tore through several Czech villages and towns, killing at least 5 people and injuring dozens. Rescuers said Friday as they cleaned up the wreckage in the storm's aftermath, which one official described as a living hell. A retirement home and zoo were badly damaged after tennis ball-sized hail battered a number of towns Thursday evening, also causing extensive power outages and traffic disruptions after a major motorway was blocked. Retirement home residents in Hdonin City were moved to a nearby hotel, according to the city on its Facebook page, while about 78,000 homes and offices were without power on Friday morning. Video footage from the region on social networks showed destroyed buildings and cars, shorn tree stumps, and several fires spewing thick black smoke. Vineyards in the winemaking region were heavily damaged, along with a chateau in the UNESCO-listed town of Valtis. The storm forced Prime Minister Andrej Babis to remain in Brussels following an EU summit, as a landing in Prague would have been too dangerous. Tornadoes are rare in the Czech Republic, with the last notable one dating to 2004, when around 50 houses were damaged in the eastern town of Litovel.
Going back to Myanmar, authorities there torch over $500 million worth of narcotics across the country, sending opium, heroin, and methamphetamine up in smoke, as experts warn smugglers have adapted to COVID-19 travel restrictions and are back in business. Sacks of green-brown cannabis were stacked high at a compound in commercial capital Yangon, alongside bin liner-sized bags of red-pink pills, marking one of Myanmar's offerings for the annual World Drug Day burning. Slabs of heroin, bags of ketamine and tramadol, and ice were also laid out on the fire. Now, stashes were also burned at ceremonies held in Mandalay and Taungyi in Shan State. Myanmar's anti-drugs police department said a total of just under $668 million of narcotics, including 224 million meth tablets, were torched in 3 cities. Despite COVID-19 travel restrictions, there's been an overall sustained expansion of the methamphetamine market in East and Southeast Asia, according to the United Nations earlier this month. Myanmar's troubled Shan State remains the main source of the drug, it added, which is often smuggled onto wealthier overseas markets, such as Australia and Japan, in its more potent crystallized form.
In other news, a highly awaited U.S. intelligence report on dozens of mysterious unidentified flying object sightings said most could not be explained, but did not rule out that some could be alien spacecraft. The unclassified report said researchers could explain only one of 144 UFO sightings by the U.S. government personnel and sources between 2004 and 2021, sightings that often were made during military training activities. 18 of those, some observed from multiple angles, appeared to display unusual movements or flight characteristics that surprised those who saw them, like holding stationary in high winds at high altitude and moving with extreme speed with no discernible means of propulsion, according to the report. Some of the 144 might be explained by natural or human-made objects like birds or drones cluttering a pilot's radar, or natural atmospheric phenomena, according to the report. Others, it said, could be secret U.S. defense tests or unknown advanced technologies created by Russia or China. The report was ordered after more UFO sightings by military pilots became public and pilot and radar videos leaked out showing flying objects behaving strangely with no explanation. It stressed that pilots and aircraft are ill-equipped to identify out of the ordinary subjects floating around the skies. The only one of the 144 incidents in the years covered by the report that was explained turned out to be a large deflating balloon. The 9-page report released Friday did not discuss any specific incidents.
Well, if there's like anything, it's rotating.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. The Philippine Central Bank left its benchmark interest rate at a record low as it sought to keep monetary policy accommodative to support the economic recovery amid heightened COVID restrictions in some areas. The BSP governor reiterated the central bank would continue to support the economy for as long as necessary, adding that the inflation outlook remained broadly balanced. Let's listen in.
Latest inflation forecasts indicate that the average inflation is likely to settle near the upper end of the target range of 2 to 4% in 2021. The BSP expects that average inflation will ease towards the midpoint of the target range in 2022 and 2023. Price pressures on food commodities have abated with favorable weather conditions and the facilitation of meat imports to augment domestic supply. The Monetary Board emphasizes that the continued implementation of direct non-monetary measures will be crucial in mitigating further supply-side pressures on meat prices and inflation. At the same time, the risk to the inflation outlook remain broadly balanced around a baseline projection path. The uptick in international commodity prices amid supply chain bottlenecks and the recovery in global demand could
lend upside pressures on inflation. However, downside risk to the inflation outlook continue to emanate from the emergence of new coronavirus variants, which could delay the easing of containment measures and temper prospects for domestic growth. Looking ahead, the BSP affirms its support to the economy for as long as necessary to ensure its strong and sustainable recovery. The BSP will also remain vigilant against any emerging risk to the outlook for inflation and growth, and will adjust its policy settings as needed.
Hindi pa yan kasi mabagal ang yan.
In other business news, electric car giant Tesla will recall over 285,000 cars from the Chinese market after an investigation found issues with its assisted driving software that could cause road collisions, a government regulator announced yesterday. Tesla would contact affected users to upgrade their vehicle software remotely for free. A State Administration of Market Regulation, or SAMR, notice said, adding that it affects some imported and domestically manufactured Model 3 and Model Y vehicles. Due to issues with the cruise control system, the driver can easily activate the cruise control function by mistake, according to the Chinese government agency in the notice. The cruise control function, which matches the speed of your car to that of the surrounding traffic, is a key part of Tesla's autopilot assisted driving function, according to the manufacturer's website. Tesla's road in China appeared to be paved with gold after founder Elon Musk was granted rare permission to build a wholly owned factory in Shanghai that has allowed it to accelerate to the head of the pack in China's huge electric car market. The company is hugely popular in China, where it sells 1 out of every 4 of its cars. The firm announced last month it would be setting up a data center in China following user backlash over fears that their data could be passed over to the U.S. Tesla shares fell almost 8% upon the news during U.S. trading hours Friday.
These are available in...
And beauty and wellness experts explore the industry's new normal. Here's Julianne Ducena in Las Vegas.
For a stretch of time last year, beauty and wellness professionals were unable to provide services to the public. And when spas and salons started to reopen, pros were faced with new struggles brought on by the shift in circumstances within the pandemic. From getting clients to come back with confidence in their safety to meeting the high demands that have resulted from the closure. Today, we are here at the International Aesthetics, Cosmetics, and Spa Conference, as well as the International Beauty Show, where professionals from all over the world are gathering not only to learn about the newest trends and products and services, but also new ways to better serve clients in these ever-changing circumstances.
These two events have been held annually pre-COVID-19 here in Las Vegas and have always served professionals dedicated to helping others look and feel their best. It's a place to shop for the latest products, learn the newest techniques, and discover the latest trends that will help them provide the best services to clients within their area of the beauty and wellness industries.
We are having a surprisingly great show. Yeah, people have turned out in their thousands. Everybody's happy. Really great show.
I brought a couple of students over. They are amazed. Like they say, if you really like the industry, you're going to love it when you get here.
The consumers are more savvy than ever, so it's important that, our professionals stay on, track with all of the latest, greatest ingredients too, because their guests know.
And I came here like pre-COVID, and I liked it a lot, so I just decided to come back to check out like the barber stuff and see what they got.
Honestly, I'm just here to have fun, to see what's new, what's not new, and what people like, because just by seeing other professionals, I can see what's actually professional.
Everyone is so open and eager to learning about new products and new things that they can bring to their business. I'm so incredibly grateful that the show happened.
Questex, who is focused on delivering essential information to communities through experiences such as these very shows, announced on the first day of the conference that they have acquired the Spa Industry Association, whose mission is to keep members up to date on resources, product updates, and industry news.
We kind of threw our hat in the ring with Questex probably 10 years ago. Of all the trade show groups that were available to talk to, and we talked to all of them, they're the ones who came to us, a much smaller group than them, and said, how can we be of service to you? So we immediately loved the way they thought in harmony about what a relationship should be with. So we really have an extended family relationship. So when they came to me not too long ago and said, Alan, we're going to acquire the association, let's talk about how that should happen, it made me smile because we were still talking the same language 10 years later.
The Spa Industry Association brings a lot to Questex. I mean, firstly, it brings Alan, who runs the association. He's well known in the industry and is able to tell us what's going on, what trends to look for, who we should be listening to. That's fantastic. That's invaluable. At the same time, we see a big database coming of all of the members. We see the people that are part of the association asking questions of us. Well, what else could we do? So we feel it's a truly symbiotic acquisition in that we can help the association with some of the things like this show and how the association can spread that to its membership. And the association brings us the ability to reach more people more deeply with great trusted relationships.
And this deeper connection paired with a further reach mattered even more this year during the events as professionals and vendors alike came together to share lessons learned and strategies developed during the pandemic challenges this past year.
We had more time for deeper connections with our accounts, and so we really did focus on education and marketing and giving our spas and individual estheticians the tools to succeed, and that's really been beneficial to us. So we will continue on with that, realizing that, that was kind of a missing link for us.
I'm a very clean person, so before, after, I feel like I personally have been the same, but I'm definitely more aware and courteous of how others feel as well.
I feel like I lost some clients during COVID, but COVID has shown me to be like a little bit more intentional on how to build clientele, grow a relationship with your clients.
One of the best things that happened to us through COVID, though, was we were able to develop an education program that was module-based, and you could do it from the comfort of your own home. So we could get people educated, and that way when they were ready to open up, they had the education and tools that they needed to get started.
I think that this pandemic has taught people a lot of things. They have learned that they have to take care of themselves, take care of their family. All of the personal parts of keeping stress down, to me, those are absolutely the number one most important thing that are going on right now.
We feel that's a trend that's going to continue post-pandemic. People are going to continue to look after themselves. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for people that are going to help them live their lives, as we say, live their lives better, as well as live their lives longer.
While sharing all of these lessons, strategies, and trends cultivate a community of growing professionals, some might wonder if attending these shows are worth it after we've all become comfortable learning from home.
I feel like it's good to come to events like this because it kind of keeps you hungry, keeps you like excited and ready to, either start new things or just go even harder in the direction that you're going.
There's nothing better than do hands-on. Education as in theory-wise, yes, online would be good, but hands-on, you gotta have hands-on. This is how you're just gonna overcome all your fears and be good at what you wanna do.
So it's clear that when it comes to the beauty world, the pandemic truly did push professionals to think outside of the box. And now more than ever, these pros are developing themselves to be their best so they can serve you best.
From the Las Vegas Convention Center for Eagle News, I'm Julianne Docena. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Julianne.
I've always wanted to attend one of those beauty expos, and I think we'll have so much fun if we were there.
Yeah, that's true.
So true. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do enjoy your weekend. I am CJ Hero. We'll see you again on Monday.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back next week. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.
This is Net 25, a commercial UHF television station owned and operated by the Eagle Broadcasting Corporation, transmitting on a 50 kilowatt output with NTC permit number BSD-0.